All right, there's that notification. All right, well, welcome everybody. And thank you so very much for giving your time to us tonight. I know you probably had a lot on your schedules, so we really appreciate you coming out. My name is Stephanie Kelly. I am part of the media team and outreach team at Hamilton 350. If you would like to introduce yourselves to everybody else that's here, feel free to do so in the chat. If you're comfortable sharing the name of any group or organization that you're part of and would like to do so, you can also do that in the chat, and feel free to share what brought you out tonight. As I mentioned right before we hit record, I am going to go over a few things that have to do with media. So this meeting is being recorded. If you are concerned about having anybody seeing your video or anything like that, you are more than welcome to keep your video on, don't get us wrong. But if you are concerned about that, the little stop video button is down in the lower left-hand corner of your screen that you can click to stop your video. In addition to that, if you're concerned about having your full name on the screen, or if you want to add your pronouns in or anything like that, you can click up on the top right corner of your particular video, and there's 3 little dots there. If you click that icon, it'll drop down and there will be a rename option that you can click. And then you just type in whatever you'd like other people to be able to see or not be able to see. If you don't want your name up at all, feel free to put a nickname or something like that. I mentioned as well already that we are going to have the microphones muted just so there's no background noise to interfere with the presentation. I'll do my best to stay on top of that as people filter in. So as long as there aren't any media questions right now, just take a look at the chat and make sure we're okay on that front. I'll turn it over to Katie, who's going to make sure we have no questions here.
All good?
Looks great. Looks great. You go right ahead, Katie.
Okay. Hi, my name's Katie. I'm a non-Indigenous colonizer. I live in Hamilton, Ontario, a city built on traditional territories of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee nations on the lands negotiated with the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty. The Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty uses the symbolism of a dish to represent the territory and one spoon to represent the people that are sharing the resources on the land, the territory, and only one spoon, signifying that we must share and only take what we need. The dish is to be kept clean. We must take care of the land and those we share it with. We do not take the dish. There are no knives present in the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty. Just one spoon, meaning to share in peace. I'd like to acknowledge the truth of this land and the history of the space that we are currently occupying. Acknowledging this truth is a small action in the process of decolonization, and I know that I have grown up and
You've muted yourself, Katie.
yeah, I think that's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I apologize, Katie. I was muting somebody coming in and I muted everyone. And
That's okay.
So there's a first road bump. We're getting things smoothed out here. Go ahead, Katie. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So again, acknowledging the truth that I'm experiencing this land differently than other people may be experiencing it. And I want to encourage you as listeners and encourage myself and colleagues in Hamilton 350 to recognize this truth, the truth of the land, and consider how reconciliation needs to thread through the concept of a just recovery. I recognize the spirit of peace, of friendship, of care, and of respect bound by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty, and I want to use my position to protect and honor the treaty lands and peoples. We acknowledge the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Treaty. We acknowledge the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Nation, and we acknowledge the truth, and especially the land. Thanks so much, Steph, and I'll hand it back to you.
All right, thank you so very much, Katie, just for bringing that to everybody's attention. And thank you all very much for participating with that, everyone who's joined us here. I apologize again. I meant to introduce Katie and let you know that she is a pretty new member to Hamilton 350. So that is the introduction that is a little bit lagging here. As you can see, we now have the agenda up, and we're going to move into going over that in a minute. Just before we do that, I would like to share the purpose of this meeting and just make sure everyone is on the same page for the reason behind we're holding it. So, COVID-19 pandemic has turned the world upside down. As we respond and begin to recover and rebuild, there are huge decisions being made about our immediate and long-term collective futures. Because these decisions are crucial to our future, we need to ensure that the best ones possible are made. Hamilton 350 has decided to host this teach-in and invite you to join in this teach-in, start a conversation about a just recovery. Our group is just one part of this conversation. If we're going to win a just recovery from this COVID-19 pandemic, we all need everyone to take responsibility for educating and organizing our communities to build an unstoppable, people-powered movement. Now I'm going to go through the agenda. So as you can see, we did start off rather with an introduction. Welcome again, everybody. And we're going to move into our presentation now. So we're going to start with the moment that we're in, followed up by a just recovery, the phases of a just recovery, that is. We're going to be playing a video during the phases of a just recovery that Canada 350 created to give us an overview of what those phases are. And then we're going to go into how we win a just recovery. After that, we'll talk a little bit about organizing for a just recovery and move into a question and answer. Once we close out, we are going to include a discussion period for anyone who wants to stay back and be able to share in a discussion about what we've presented. So if you're comfortable staying on after our closing statement, you are more than welcome to do so. Just before we move into the presentation, I'm going to turn things over to Bianca, our chat chair, so she can give us a few rules and a bit of information about the chat while we're going through this presentation.
Thank you, Steph. Hello, everyone. My name is Bianca Metz, and I assist with social media and outreach with Hamilton 350. I'm the chat chair host for this evening, and so throughout the chat, we encourage you to discuss what a just recovery means to you, what comes up for you in this time, and please share any questions or important information you feel at the moment. Share your feelings and reactions, and we just want to hear how this moves you. And unfortunately, Zoom doesn't allow us to incite a discussion with this many people, but we certainly want to keep that going where we can in the chat. So we will also be hosting a Q&A afterwards, and we can kind of create some more dialogue there. But please stick around for that if you can, and just introduce yourself in the chat, as Stephanie said, and we look forward to discussing everything with you tonight. So thank you, Steph.
Thank you very much, Bianca. I was answering something in the chat, which I'm very glad you're here to do because we don't need to have those kinds of pauses. Anyway, I'm going to bring in Dawn McLean now. Dawn is a co-founder of Hamilton 350, and Dawn is going to walk us through the moment we're in right now. So Dawn, if you're ready, we'd love to welcome you to the floor.
I hope that I'm in.
You are in.
We are in the middle of an unprecedented crisis. It is one part pandemic, one part economic crisis, and one part the cumulative impact of converging climate and social crises that have been manufactured over decades by corporate and political elites. It is also tainted by racism against Black folks, Indigenous nations, and other racialized people. When this crisis hit, over half of Canadians were already living paycheck to paycheck, and at least a fifth of the renters in major cities were spending more than half of their income on rent. In Hamilton, it is worse, with nearly half forced to spend more than a third of their income keeping a roof over their head. And that means millions of low-income earners who often have only precarious employment are unable to afford not to keep working. In the first few weeks of March alone, a record 1 million people in Canada applied for unemployment insurance. And since then, another 5 million more have applied. Officials predict the unemployment rate could skyrocket to the highest level since World War II. No one hasn't been touched by this crisis in one way or another. The reality is, this crisis isn't impacting everyone in the same way. It's hitting hardest in historically and currently marginalized communities. And the connection to climate couldn't be more alarming. Fossil fuel companies have been lobbying hard for relaxed environmental monitoring, using COVID-19 as the excuse. Right-wing politicians like Jason Kenney and Doug Ford are handing them these concessions on a silver platter. Meanwhile, we're on track for an above average wildfire season across the country, meaning we can anticipate more threats to homes and lives and reduced air quality in many places. That is expected to worsen the impact of COVID-19, especially for those with asthma and other respiratory illnesses. Not to mention the fact that physical distancing will present new barriers to emergency response measures like evacuations in the hardest hit areas. Okay, take a deep breath. We know these stories are heavy. I know I'm feeling the weight of this all. Who else has felt at some point the sheer weight of these crises bearing down on us? Put your comments in the chat. We won't go back. What all this means is that we can't go back to what normal looked like before the crisis. How we respond to, recover from, and rebuild after this crisis will likely define the next chapter of human history. And with stakes like that, we need to get it right. There are some phases ahead that we can already see playing out and being shored up. If we think a few steps ahead, we can plan a powerful force of organizing that can move us through the respond, recover, and rebuild phases in a way that gets us the just recovery we need and puts us on the path to a Green New Deal.
Thank you very much, Dawn, for outlining all those pertinent and important aspects of the moment that we're in. Thank you as well for covering the three phases briefly there. That's what we're going to move into next. We're going to start this section off with a video, as I mentioned before. I forgot to mention, as Ruth had asked, that if you don't like the video of us speaking, showing over the slides or whatever video that we're going to be playing, you can just click up at the top of your screen. There's a view options bar right at the top there. If you click on the view options, you can either put hide video panel or put it side by side. So if you prefer to not have the video overlapping the slides, like the video of us speaking overlapping the slides, that's another option as well. So just before we go into the video, I'm going to introduce Ruth Pickering. She's going to be talking a little more about the phases after the video. Ruth has been a member of Hamilton 350 for many years. She's also a member of Elders for Climate Sanity. As I mentioned, she's going to speak to the three phases of a just recovery right after we play this video for you.
I'm not getting the sound. Is it coming?
No, I don't believe the sound is on, so.
Oh,
wanna-
maybe Miriam's muted.
I believe she is muted. And Miriam, do you have the share audio option in your share screen settings? I know I had that off accidentally the first time I did it. Bear with us, everyone.
Yeah, tell me again, what am I supposed to do? I'll try to.
Yeah, I'm just the little arrow beside the share screen.
Yeah.
Yep. So click onto that,
Mm-hmm.
and then it'll bring up the screen,
Yeah.
and should be an advanced options bar in the share screen that you can click on.
So sorry, everybody.
And then down at the bottom of the screen, there's two little boxes that you can click. One's optimizing video quality, and one says share computer audio.
Can we go on with Ruth's slides in the meantime while I'm figuring this out?
Yeah,
Makes sense?
if Ruth is comfortable with that, we can do it that way, and then we can sum up what you have to say, what you're speaking to, Ruth, with the video, if you're comfortable with that.
Sure, that's fine. And then we can use the video afterwards, after this section, if necessary, right?
All right, beautiful.
Okay, I'm going to speak of the 3 phases of just recovery. The first phase is to respond. During COVID-19, we've been taking care of our families, our neighbors and friends, and those who are disabled and are living alone. At the same time, we have become acutely aware of the enormous cracks in our system that massively undervalue and underpay the essential workers we depend on for our health and safety. We know we must create the conditions for a just recovery. Now is the time to begin reaching out in our communities and neighborhoods to come together behind this vision. So the response is about our getting started on this. And the recovery, we can move to the next slide, the recovery slide. Good. This second phase is the recovery. Even before a full recovery, we need to be ready to take action while the important decisions are being made and before they are being carried out. The feds are strategizing now. They've created a green recovery task force, which includes McKenna, Wilkinson, and Guilbeault. Wealthy corporate interests, of course, are actively lobbying politicians to cut social services, to lift environmental regulations, and relax labor laws in order to help the economy come back. We need to be ready to take action together. We must send a strong message to Trudeau and the green recovery. We must send a strong message to Trudeau and the Green Recovery Task Force that we deserve a just recovery that puts people first, meets our community needs, guarantees millions of decent green jobs, and tackles the climate crisis. So as spring starts to turn the corner towards summer, we'll use different tactics, both online and offline, to bring our demands both to the public and those in power. The recovery is not going to look exactly the same in different areas and regions. There will continue to be false starts until we learn more about what works. The recovery will be manifest when responsible managed reduction in social distancing measures are not followed by resurgence of new cases. We will have to be nimble, watch for opportunities for action, and be ready for curveballs. The reality is that these phases overlap, and when future outbreaks occur, response organizing will be necessary during all the other phases. Now let's move to the rebuild section, please. Or is that, I guess we've already done that, haven't we? Okay, I'll just speak on it. So in the rebuild period, once we've responded and recovered, we have to transform our society so that it works for everyone, not just a wealthy few. And we have the answer, a Green New Deal that works for people and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. outlining the phases of a just recovery and what will be involved with each. And thanks for everyone for continuing the conversation in the chat box there. Mary, that sounds like quite a story that you've got going on. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, just my apologies. I can't figure out the video yet, so please let's keep going for now.
Okay, not a problem. If you get it figured out, Miriam, we'll share it near the end. And if not, what we can do is we can send you a link to the video after this is over. You can take a look at it. It's also posted on Hamilton 350's Facebook page. So that's another option if you're interested in viewing Canada 350's video about the 3 phases of a just recovery.
I think I found it. Okay,
Found
let's
it?
try again. Yes, forgive me, we'll try again.
All right.
Better?
Got it.
There are 2 choices ahead of us. We can either return to a status quo that's destroying the planet for the sake of a wealthy few, or we can leverage this crisis to build a world that works for all of us.
To do so, we, alongside thousands of groups around the world, are calling for a just recovery that puts people before profit.
So how are we going to do it? The only way we are going to win a just recovery is by building a mass, people-powered movement that will fight for it. We are going to need to organize through 3 distinct phases.
First, there's the response. This is the phase that most of us are in right now.
Here, we're responding to the crisis and making sure that people have what they need,
both through mutual aid efforts and by demanding increased government action.
We're also standing up to oil and gas lobbyists and multi-billion-dollar corporations demanding massive bailouts. Soon, we'll move into the recovery phase.
This is when governments will start to reopen the economy and attempt to return us to a normal that has always been deadly and destructive.
During this period, a small corporate elite will be circling like vultures to make billions off the crisis.
They'll sacrifice workers and communities in the name of profit and pressure all levels of government in hopes of lining their pockets with stimulus funding that should be going to everyday people. For us, this is a key phase in the fight for a just recovery. This is the phase where we fight for government action to meet our community's needs instead.
This will lead us into the rebuilding phase. As social distancing is lifted, the wealthy elite and the politicians that serve them will try and claim that we've spent too much over the past months and that we must cut, roll back, and privatize critical public services. For us, this is the time to win the transformative change we need, rebuilding through a made-in-Canada Green New Deal that respects Indigenous rights, creates millions of good jobs, and finally, enshrines dignity and justice for all.
If we can bring together enough of our neighbors and friends and convince them to talk to their neighbors and friends about why we need a just recovery, we can get the ball rolling.
Then we'll take action together, likely starting online, but then moving into the streets to put direct pressure on those in power.
Because let's face it, we all have something to lose because of the climate crisis, and we've all been impacted by coronavirus in some way.
Every single one of us has something to fight for right now, and if enough of us come together, we can win a Green New Deal and finally begin building a world that works for all of us, and not just the wealthy few.
All right, that's wonderful, Miriam. Thank you so much for sharing that video with us. I'm really glad you were able to do that. This was originally presented by Canada 350, and that's why we're willing to share, not willing, but happy rather to share that video for this presentation. So thank you everybody again for keeping the conversation going in the chat. Juliana, I believe that's how you pronounce that name. I apologize if I have it wrong. We're just talking about how responding is huge right now, and we absolutely agree. There are bills being passed right now that are going to affect our future, and they will continue to happen into the future as we come out of this pandemic. I'm going to turn things back over to Katie now, who you met earlier, and she's going to walk us through how we can win a just recovery. Katie, whenever you're ready.
Hi, thanks, Steph.
No
And
problem.
thank you, Miriam. That video is well worth the wait. So Juliana is talking about how now is the response time, and we can see that happening right now, especially online. I've noticed, especially on Instagram with young folks and all folks. So in the chat, you're welcome to respond your imagined idea of what a just recovery would look like to you. It can be as utopic as you'd like. And in the meantime, I'd like to go over the 6 principles that a group of Canadian organizations and grassroots leaders have come up with in a means to meet a Green New Deal. So next slide, Miriam. These are the 6 principles that they came up with. They're quite broad and a little bit overwhelming at first. So we'll have plenty of time afterwards to speak about them or ask questions. So number 1, put people's health and well-being first, no exceptions. Number 2, strengthen the social safety net and provide economic relief directly to people, no matter what their status. Prioritize the needs of workers and communities. Build resilience to prevent future crises. Build solidarity and equity across communities, generations, and borders. And number 6, uphold Indigenous rights and work in partnership with Indigenous peoples. And what I would add to that is throughout the entire process. How do we win? So we have 2 graphs here. The first one shows that the majority, 73% of folks believe that post-COVID, there will be a broad transformation of our society. And in the second one, 70% of folks believe that Canadian society will, after COVID, start to put more focus on health and well-being of people. And there's who has written the 6 principles? I think it's like a combined campaign. I don't know exactly who. I know that Canada 350 has been involved in the writing of the 6 principles, but it's been a number of organizations. We will get back to you on the answer of that. So the collective action would be the next. And across, so basically they've come up with these 6 principles and the 3 R's, and then have encouraged us to share these 5 sets of action that we can take in the community, which include pressuring the federal government to pay attention to this just recovery plan that has been developed. Number 2 is to host a teach-in of your own, like this, or with a small group of friends. Number 3, something you can do in your home or in your backyard or over your fence to your backdoor neighbor would be to talk to them about the just recovery and your perception of what it could be, and just spread the word. Number 4, sign the open letter that is available on 350.org. So yeah, 350.org, yeah. And then, sorry. And then 5 would be to take action locally, which is kind of the idea of getting everyone connected on this video chat. And then in hopes, we do hope to have a follow-up video chat after this, coming up with more concrete local action. And Hamilton 350 would like to probably share our local action. I know that one of my local actions is if I'm allowed to have a birthday party for myself in July, if there's allowed to be that, maybe even just like 5 to 10 people, I'm going to give out these flyers that are anti-Enbridge pipeline flyers about a pipeline that Enbridge has proposed to put through Hamilton. So that's what I want to do, door to door, but I unfortunately cannot do that right now. And this collective action would be how we win. That's all on my part.
That's wonderful, Katie. Thank you very much for walking us through how we win a just recovery. I'm just going to reiterate what she was saying and summarize a little bit. So the big thing that we can do right now is to spread the word. One way you can do that is deliver this webinar to a group or organization that you're involved with, or even family and friends. You can contact us for slides and speaking notes to do so. That'll help you through this process. Also, you can discuss and promote the principles of a just recovery with elected representatives in your area and urge them to embrace and implement these principles. As Katie just mentioned, our hope is to host a strategy session sometime in the near future with groups and individuals to create a plan for a just recovery in Hamilton, and what we can do as Hamiltonians, not only locally, but also provincially and nationally. And we want this just recovery to represent the 6 principles that we listed earlier. So thank you everybody very much for participating in the chat and listening to us speak. We are going to head into the question and answer period of the evening now, and we're going to take screen share off during this question and answer period, just so we can see your beautiful faces and make this a little more interactive. So again, if you're concerned about other people seeing your camera or having your name listed or anything like that, feel free to turn that off or change the way your name is displayed. And Bianca will lead us through question and answer. Whenever you're ready, Bianca.
Great, thank you. Thank you to all the presenters. It's very moving. The video is very moving. You all are so captivating and passionate. So this has been great so far. So this is the time in the evening where we'd like to kind of call in some people who have elaborated on a few things in the chat. So first I'd like to start with Jim Quinn. Let me just head to your comment here. So Jim, I am gonna just unmute you just to make sure, or ask to unmute you to make sure that you're muted when I call on you. So Jim, you said a just recovery would take funding from police and fund people and organizations that are specialized to deal with equity, mental health crisis, etc. Would you like to elaborate on that for us and just kind of maybe go into a little bit more detail about how that, what is represented by that?
Sure. I think this comment comes from recent events in the U.S. where we're seeing the president there inciting violence, inciting militarization to prevent people from expressing their indignation and horror at the unfortunate death or murder, I should say, of George Floyd. This is following a whole string of these kinds of events where I think the police have shown that in large part they are very happy with the power they have. If people don't listen to them, they will sometimes use lethal force, and that lethal force is often totally inappropriate and often involves people that are in distress in terms of their mental health crisis, other events like that. The police are asking for more and more money so that they can do things like infiltrate schools, so that they can apparently educate the children so that they won't be criminals, and they want more money so that they can become closer in the community and help the community. And they want more money so that they can train their officers so that they can handle these mental health issues better. These are all things that there are already people that are trained to do. We don't need to be funding the police to be doing this. We should be taking away jobs from the police that are not essential for some kind of a weaponized force. We should be restricting their source of weaponry. We should not be paying them more money to buy more and more weapons. We should be changing our society so that police play a very, very minimal role, and other people that are trained to favor equity and health of the community can play those roles instead. That's what I meant by that.
Thank you. Whether I think, but I have a very young son who this has definitely improved my education in terms of how I will fight to advocate for education for young people moving forward. It really will change with them. So thank you for sharing that. Does do any of our speakers want to elaborate or kind of continue the discussion about that comment, or I can move on? If you do, just unmute yourself, Don.
Yeah, just in terms of the local situation, about 20% of the city's operating budget goes to the police force. And it's by far the largest single component in the budget. So there's a lot of money involved in this local police force. And if we're not happy with what they're doing, and we know that there are professionals able to do those jobs better, then there's good argument to be diverting funds away from the police, as Jim has suggested. So I just wanted to fill in that number, that 20% of the city's budget goes to the police force at this point.
Yeah, that's a significant amount, especially when our job is to hold them accountable as well, not just money in the coffers. Thank you, Don. So I did have another comment here I'd like to address if this individual is okay with it. I'm not sure if I got an answer. Oh, yes, I did. Thank you. Hi, Agnes. Thank you for joining us tonight. You would like to unmute yourself. I'm just going to read your comment here, and I'd love for you to elaborate on that as well. Let me just bring that up here. Okay. So your comment here is, can we also pressure the Canadian government to meet their commitments to the Global Adaptation Fund? The nations that struggle to adapt to climate change before have their problems multiplied with COVID-19. Absolutely. Would you honor us with elaborating on that?
Sure. I'm sorry I don't have the official name for that fund, but as part of the Paris Climate Accord, countries agreed to balance between rich countries and countries of the global south resources and finances to help countries adapt. And at this point, Canada has not contributed the amount of funds that they promised. Some other groups, notably in the faith community, are asking the government to add, or are asking that in a just recovery, they include that piece as well, our international responsibilities. There's no doubt that we have a lot of work to do at home. But the other thing that COVID has done is turned all of us to looking inward, to protecting ourselves. That happens at the borders, it happens with refugees, it happens with our responses to the outside world. We're looking in right now. If we continue to do that, that there are places that will suffer far, far more than we are. This also has to do with international Canadian charities who've not been able to raise the funds that they need for their international work because of the climate crisis. So with those funds sort of dried up, and the Canadian government, as are many others, looking inward, these countries in the global south, just like climate change, are suffering more than we are from COVID-19. If you think about countries in Africa where they already have significant immune deficiencies, what happens when COVID takes over in a country that's also got a high proportion of AIDS people? So these are things that, while it's not part of everyone's just recovery, I think it's one that we should consider including. Absolutely, thank you. It's the holistic view is certainly
is certainly it is the most important aspect. So I think I speak for everyone when I say we'd love to have you continue to support us in that perspective. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And I've written down your name, so thank you for introducing yourself, and we will absolutely reach out and likewise, please. So thank you for that. So I do have a comment here from Juliana. I'd like to read that more so as a statement, because unless Juliana, you feel that you'd like to elaborate, if you unmute yourself while I read it, then I will have my answer, but if not, we can absolutely move on. So Juliana had commented to stop investing in non-renewable resources and use this systemic pause to plan for new green infrastructure. And it's such an important comment. So Juliana, would you have my answer? Amazing. Definitely share more with us about that. You did mention it's more an idealistic viewpoint, but we just share away.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's kind of tricky with that because, that feels like something to me that like seems like an obvious truth. But speaking from like, a financial and actually like whatever that would look like in terms of building that infrastructure, I don't have the expertise, knowledge, depth for that. But just things like, when the whole world is on pause and paying attention to things like Katie mentioned earlier in social media, so many like poignant issues are really being brought up. But at the same time, so many things are kind of being overshadowed by COVID. But I think it's like a pause to be able to address, changing energy sources. Like while we're not using our cars as much, while all this stuff is going on, can there be a group planning for, how to unroll or roll out new things? Because I think a lot of the time we're just on this precipice of trying to keep up, and like, our society needs certain things to keep going the way it wants to go. So unless everybody's prepared to change their whole lifestyle, things aren't going to change. So how do you roll out that change, make it gradual? And, I think that kind of planning really needs to happen. And I was going to add to that comment too, just like a localization, the uprising of that, people need to be like in their communities every day, but he's just more aware. There's more people cycling. I think it just hopefully from the bottom up, I guess.
Absolutely. And I know Katie emulated that aspect in her presentation when she was mentioning how important it is to respect our green spaces. And it really starts with understanding that. And I know I had commented on it as well, but that's one of the points that I'm very focused and passionate on, is that if you don't understand nature and you don't respect nature and you're not in nature, what is it about that will make you want to save it? And so this disassociation that we have with nature, and how we run our lives in a less, convenient way, there's no motivation there. So this time has really taught us to slow down, and it has really taught us to see what it is that we're doing that is ruining this world. So that is such an amazing point. Renewables are so unbelievably important, and it is about taking risks. You absolutely have to take risks, because then nothing will be done. But then you have people who want to shut that down, which is where we find ourselves now. So it's just people like us who are going to make the difference. So thank you so much for that. Did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because from the previous point that was made too about like, wellness and health and holistic approach, how the environment and our planet being healthy also means us being healthy. So with COVID being, kind of an attack on our personal health, just seeing how, just kind of relating the two and that building that perspective a bit more too, I think is really important.
Absolutely. It's it's at the crux of it is our personal health, and if we're making bad choices, that just means we're perpetuating the problem. So I totally agree with that. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. I do have another comment here by Scott. I'm wondering if you're willing to elaborate on that, or if that's something you're happy just to leave as is in the chat.
Would you mind very quickly, Bianca, if we just check in with Katie here? I think she would like to make a comment towards what Juliana was saying there.
Oh, of course. Go ahead, Katie.
Sorry, I didn't know if you saw me, but that's okay.
No, sorry.
First of all, I was going to say that I was went to Toronto a couple weekends ago and drove, and Lakeshore was closed and only Gardner was open, and there were so many people cycling. It was really nice to see. So I thought maybe that would be a good idea for, instead of changing Queen Street to two-way, we could just change it to just a bike path. Anyways, that's my pipe dream. And then I also think that the first principle in the just recovery about people's health is pretty encompassing of everything that it's aiming to change, like just recognizing how interconnected climate and health is, which we have known that for a long time. And I'm just realizing that what's happening, which is what Scott, and I'm happy for Scott to speak to it, but Scott gave a link, and I shared the link again, about what organizers in Hamilton who are focused on anti-Black racism are asking the city of. And I think that what's happening in the States, but in Canada and all over the world right now, where this is coming to the forefront, even the forefront of COVID, is it's really important, as difficult as it is.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Katie. Thanks so much. So thank you, Scott. We will leave that in the chat for everyone wondering. That link is up there, and we will save this chat, and we can copy and paste that in or forward that rather, in our follow-up email that we will send to all of you. I know we have a few minutes left, and we have promised to, I'm not sure if we said this vocally, but I believe a few of us with Hamilton 350 are willing to stick around for a more open discussion after the Q&A, just to kind of, open up the conversation. And I know that gets a little messy, but we're going to go with it because we think it's really important. So in the last few minutes, what I'd like to do is just use this time. I know the agenda is completely for the three 6 principles. But because we do have a few minutes left, I'd love to call on Dawn just to give us a couple of ways that we can raise local awareness in Hamilton, or anything that's going on right now that people might be interested in. If you want to go ahead, Dawn, if that's okay.
You're asking me back in here. That may be a mistake. I put a microphone in front of me. I may not shut up.
That's okay.
Thank you for everybody who's participated here tonight. And as Bianca said, we will we'll hang around and carry on discussion for at least another half hour if people want to talk to us or want to talk to each other. There's no necessity to shut this meeting down at 8 o'clock, but we did want to make it something which was manageable in terms of the length of the meeting for everyone. So we're flexible on that. In terms of what's happening locally, there are lots of things that Hamilton 350 is involved in, but I want to go back and pick up on what was mentioned by Stephanie at the end of the presentation, which is that we see the next step as being one in which several groups come together in Hamilton to talk more specifically about what can we do here and what can we do together. I think one of the features that I was trying to emphasize in the portion that I spoke, and 350 Canada, who originally drafted this, are emphasizing, is that we need to get out of the silos. We need to actually recognize that we're all trying for the same kinds of things. And it's been useful, of course, to focus on something, as we focused on climate, and other organizations are focusing on protecting and enhancing the lives of the homeless, and others are focusing on other aspects of the justice movement, the situation facing Black people and the police. There's lots of different elements going on in Hamilton, and they really are at a fundamental level aligned. And if we're talking about a just recovery, it's got to be a just recovery for all of us. It can't just be, oh yes, we're now going to move towards some improvement on the way we address climate. And too bad about the people who are our healthcare workers who've been underpaid and under-recognized, or the people who are the cleaners in the hospitals and the cleaners in the stores, that we become so aware that they are critical to our basis of our livelihood and our safety. I think what COVID-19 in particular has shown us is that we are all in this together. The reality is if the disease persists in significant amounts in any corner of our society, and in fact, in any corner of the globe, we remain significantly threatened by it. That's the nature of disease, and that's something that I think has been a lesson from the pandemic experience to this point, and needs to be remembered and needs to be part of how we move forward. So I'll stop there and let others jump in, but I think it's worth listening to others who are working in areas other than the climate work that Hamilton 350 is mainly focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great segue, actually. Let's just pause that note for 1 second. I'm going to hand this back to Steph to thank everyone in case anyone is really looking to enjoy the sunset. And so, Steph, if you're okay with the goodbye, and then we'll just head back to Dawn. Anyone who is interested in staying after for a discussion, please do. And we're definitely interested in what everyone else is bringing to the table for the conversation. So I'll hand it back to you, Steph, for a moment.
All right. Thank you very much, Jim, Agnes, Juliana, Scott, for posting that link in the chat, and everyone else who's been involved in writing in the chat, sharing links in the chat, giving us suggestions. That is so wonderful. So again, we're going to continue a discussion after this if you'd like to stick around, and if not, you can always email us. I just put it in the chat, but you can always email us at sorry there, Bianca, at info@hamilton350.org. So again, thank you all so very much for giving us your time tonight and participating in tonight's teach-in. As Dawn mentioned pretty well, and I'm not sure I need to summarize it again, but I will, our next step should be a collaborative one that involves groups and individuals within Hamilton, determine what we can do locally, provincially, and nationally, work towards winning a just recovery after we come out of this crisis. If your group or organization or you yourself would like to be involved in the strategy session that we hope to hold in the upcoming weeks to discuss what we can do and how we can organize this just recovery, again, you can email us at info@hamilton350.org. And again, that's in the chat box, but I can post it again, and we'll post it again at the end of the discussion, just in case anyone misses that. I believe that's everything. I do also just want to thank Miriam, who's been working in the background, sharing the slides and sharing that video with us. And thank you as well for Scott for sharing your links. Scott is also a part of the Hamilton 350 Media and Outreach team, so we always appreciate your input, Scott. If I've missed anybody that our team thinks deserves to be mentioned or thanked, please feel free to jump in and make sure I've covered everything. Thank you again, everyone, so much. We really, really appreciate it, and we are super thrilled with how many people came out tonight. So thank you very, very much for giving us your time.
Thank you, but also you can stay if you'd like to chat.
So, sorry, go ahead.
I noticed something like a comment in here from Rose about talking about how we can't have a just recovery without food policies and food security, and I guess dismantling the food system that we have currently happening, which is not great. And I think that, I guess that would probably fall under one of the principles. I wonder which one that one would fall under. But I think food, I think food's really a huge, I'm just rambling now, but It's really important. And yeah, what do you guys think about food?
No, that's a great comment, Katie, and I'm sorry to jump in here. I forgot to mention while we're doing this discussion, pardon me, if you do want to say anything, we would love if you could put your hand up, or if you know how to put your hand up there in the participation box. It would be lovely, and that way we don't have microphones competing for each other. But yeah, if anyone wants to talk to what Katie was just saying about food, go right ahead. That'd be lovely. I see Mary here has her hand up, and Brody has his hand up. So I'll go with you, Mary, then we'll hit Brody. And if I see anyone else, I will come back to you.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks, Steph.
Well, everybody's saying that, you know, so many people are out, you know, buying seedlings and so on. So like somebody was saying, like we're looking inward and, you know, we're thinking, oh, geez, you know, the food system, we were worried it would collapse. It didn't, but it could. And so like that's the sort of like thinking of yourself and your family maybe. But that's where we can try and move this out to, you know, a more community focus. And I think it's a really good start. And it also goes into thinking of the land and always being conscious that we're on, you know, basically sovereign Indigenous land. And I think that, you know, this time for reflection is really, really important. And just also like it all ties in, even like the slow food movement, right? You know, don't skip the dishes. Make your own food out of, you know, the best ingredients you can find, the most local, depending on your budget. And like it's a very difficult time. It's also an exciting time, and it's just going to depend how many people have thought enough and gone deeply inside themselves to realize that the way we're living wasn't really making them very happy and wasn't going along a good path in terms of sustainability. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Mary. Very, very good point. Brody, do you still want to speak? And Sue, I see your hand up as well there.
I was just going to say, when Kitty was asking about food and what we think about it, I think it's so important, and I feel like it doesn't get the kind of respect it deserves or care amongst a lot of policymakers, which I find, and I guess maybe a lot of our culture in general, which seems funny to me because without food, people really, really are keenly aware when they're lacking. And it makes me kind of wonder if people in positions of power or who kind of don't have this at the forefront, it's sort of like, it makes me wonder if they've ever really been really hungry in their life. And yeah, because I think that really impacts a person's personality and it can kind of shape your worldview.
Absolutely. Sue, go take it away.
Okay, thinking about local organic farms, they need to be supported a lot more instead of the agribusiness farming where acres and acres of land is given over to one crop, for example. Anyway, you know probably what I'm talking about for sure. So I think we, in terms of the land, we need to respect the land and grow food in a way that doesn't deplete the land's nutrients and doesn't, so no use of pesticides, herbicides, all of those things. Yeah, that's it for now.
Thank you very much, Sue, for sharing that. Dawn, I see your hand up, and Bianca as well. So I'll put it to you, Dawn.
Yeah, it's interesting how the COVID crisis has made clear the fundamental problems with our food system. So two of the biggest outbreaks of COVID-19 have occurred in the food system. One has been in the food packing places, the meat packing places, particularly run by Cargill, 2 or 3 companies that deal with and supply most of the meat that is on our table, and do so in conditions which are highly dangerous to work in on any given day, even without a pandemic, and have been shown to be dramatically more dangerous when a pandemic is underway because people are jammed together for a long period of time. The second one that we see locally now that has just exploded in the media in the last couple of days has been the outbreak among farm workers in Norfolk County, and another over 200 people infected in a situation where, again, the workers are crowded together, in this case, in their habitation because they are not Canadians. They are people coming in, being brought in from other countries. And that's also the case in the meatpacking plants where there's a heavy reliance on what were called and discussed back in the Harper area, temporary foreign workers. We now have 500,000 of those in Canada. And the agricultural sector, 30% of its workforce, it falls into that category, according to statistics released today by Statistics Canada. So these are indications, further indications that our current food system is unsustainable. It needs to change. It's not resilient to the kinds of impacts that COVID has thrown at it. It's not resilient to other impacts that we're going to see as a result of droughts and importing of food that we can no longer import because those areas are no longer able to produce food, and the kinds of impacts we're going to see on our own agricultural systems in Canada that will again throw the system into chaos. These are things which we need to talk about. We need to point out that this is shouldn't be a big surprise. We've got a system which is brittle, which doesn't work for people, where we have in our food system moved to a situation where virtually only a very tiny proportion of the population is now involved in growing food for the market. And the move towards people growing their own food and people supporting local organic farm systems and so on is so important, not just from the perspective that it's more just, but also from the perspective that it's a lot more resilient. It's a lot more likely to be able to survive the kinds of bumps and shifts that we're going to see and are already seeing as we move along. Thanks.
Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you very much, Dawn, as well. Yes, for that information. Those are all rather very good points. Bianca, I know you had your hand up, and I see you as well, Ruth. I'm just going to suggest after that we move on to another topic in case anyone else has a specific question about something else. And if not, I am more than comfortable with continuing on this conversation because it's very, very interesting. So Bianca, go ahead, and then we'll follow up with Ruth.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. So a big thing that comes to mind when food and food insecurity and the industrialization of food anyway, comes up is this. I like to throw things back to the people. I think it's really important that we hold ourselves accountable in our own consumptive habits. And so for us to be a self-reliant community, we have to be self-reliant in how we exist. So, or don't have to be, I'm just recommending that we could be. So, growing your own food is an absolute start. Supporting your local farmers is an absolute start. Breaking down the barriers that organic is best. There are a lot of farmers out there who can't afford to get the organic stamp who practice organic farming. So it's always really important to note, just to dispel certain things that are always brought up to ensure that the people who have the money make the money. So there are all these different things that we can really focus on. And so just being self-reliant and self-sufficient is something that has come up so prevalent right now, because when we found ourselves in isolation, people began hoarding, they began panicking, and that distribution of resources, as Brody said, becomes so difficult, and you really only realize these things when it potentially might be taken away from you. So I think that's important to note, is that we need to hold ourselves accountable, and we need to put our money where our mouth is, literally. And so that would be a big thing that I'm passionate about, and I think, could really put us forward again. Knowing where our food comes from is only going to help us respect the environment a lot more.
Wonderful point. Thank you very much, Bianca. I'm going to turn it over to Ruth.
Yes, thank you. With regard to both the energy question, I think Juliana asked, amongst other things, and the questions about food, one of the things we'll need to work toward is lobbying the government to invest in renewables and invest in healthy food instead of the chemistry and the agricultural industry and the oil industry. And that's one of the ways that this gets paid for. We invest billions and billions and billions in big industry that gives us terrible food, ruins our land, pollutes our air. And those are some of the systemic things that we're going to need to look at and find ways then of lobbying the government for shifting funds, like away from police into social workers and mental health workers and school workers, and a lot of those ideas. So to take these issues and then make them systemic, and then create a way to influence the government, so we get some major things. One of the other thoughts I've had, and I've heard it before, that one of the ways we can solve the terrible crisis that we've had in Canada and other countries about the disproportionate vulnerability we allow for seniors, and particularly those in elder care. And a simple solution to that would be bringing it under the Health Act, so that it's publicly funded, available, accessible, and transportable. So I think there are a lot of these things we can translate as our conversations move forward with the other sectors of people, of advocates for all the other variety of ills that happen, and try to convert that into some policies that our governments have to look at. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Those are some excellent points. Absolutely agree that if people are comfortable, based on how much this has stimulated conversation already, if we want to bring these ideas to our speak-in that we want to have later, and present these actionable items to other people that may join us there. So that was a great topic of conversation, and thank you very much, everyone, for participating in that. Does anyone have any other questions that they'd like to discuss now? I see Ken. I'm not sure if you were here before, Ken, so thank you very much for joining us. And I'll open up the floor to anyone. If you're interested, feel free to put your hand up or unmute yourself and go to town, for lack of a better way of saying it. Christine, I'm not sure if I see your hand coming up and down there, so I definitely see Jim's hand up and Dawn's hand up. But I just want to, no? Okay, I want to talk to Christine first here, and then we'll move John. So Christine, go ahead.
You need to unmute
there we
yourself.
Go.
Yeah,
there we are. I think I've got it. I would like to bring in the conversation that I guess really begins to look at the spiritual side of what we're dealing with. And that is to recognize that what we are going through is a grieving process. And I think if I've certainly spent a fair amount of time connecting with a very old book written by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross to look at the various stages of people's responses to the COVID crisis, which also is, very much aligned with the climate crisis in terms of how we respond to change. And of course, one of the things that we see much of is denial, which is the first step in death and dying. And it seems to me that if we don't recognize that our old ways are dying because they don't work, we will potentially miss a very, very important piece in getting the 100 monkeys to be on the same page, because we all need to recognize what we're losing and that we need to retool, reboot, rebuild something very new that leaves a lot behind. It doesn't have to be depressing. We can get to a point where we're going to be quite, and have been, quite creative. But I think it's really, I would like to find a place for where my reflections can find a way to include the elements of death and dying as part of what we're saying goodbye to, because we need to.
Thank you very much, Christine. Those are some wonderful points, and I'm really glad that you felt comfortable bringing them forth here. I see Brody clapping here silently for you. So what you're talking about is exactly what this meeting is trying to encourage, with bringing in a new system that focuses on the kinds of things that you're talking about. So I'm going to check in with John here and just make sure your question is different than what Christine is talking about. Because if so, I just wonder if somebody wants to speak to it.
If someone wants to speak to it, let them go ahead, because mine's completely different.
Okay, I had a feeling. I don't want to put you on the spot, Miriam, but I think you might be the best person to speak to this. If you're uncomfortable with that, then don't worry about it. If somebody else wants to speak to it as well, that's completely fine. What do you think, Miriam? Are you on board?
Well, I completely support what you said, Christine. We have actually had a monthly sharing circle to talk about climate grief and anxiety as well. And for sure, it's not just the climate, it's a lot of changes. There's out of grieving can come, out of saying goodbye to the old, which was destructive, we can really come out on with better ways to live. I'm sure you're right about that.
Thank you very much, Miriam. And that's why I suggested that Miriam speak to that, because she does do a sharing circle about anxiety and things towards environmentalism. But I would be interested if she'd be interested in doing something like that for COVID-19. But again, I'm not trying to put you in the spot there, Miriam, so I apologize if I'm doing that. Would anyone else like to speak to what Christine has shared with us before we move on to John? Kate?
I also agree, and I think that we still have a lot to learn about grief, and I just think that my heart goes out to communities that have been experiencing traumatic grief over and over and over again, just because of their positionality, like their identity. I think that while recognizing that we're grieving like the way that we used to live, we can also recognize that it's a privilege in a way to be grieving that. You know what I mean? And that's all I had there.
Oh, thank you, Katie. I really appreciate that. It's nice to have another perspective, so thanks so much. And thank you again, Christine, for sharing your thoughts. They were really lovely, and I'm really glad that you're willing to share those. Is anyone else interested in speaking to Christine's point, or would we like to talk to John? Moving on to John? Okay, lovely. John, you have the floor.
Thanks very much, Stephanie. I've been involved with basic income for quite a few years, and it's part of the concept that fits within the recovery that we have to go through. And I love living through the interesting times that we're living in right now. I'm in my 60s, and I've seen a lot of history happening. And these are really interesting times. We are trying to save the human race. How often does that happen? It never happens. I think that we have to approach this practically in what's coming up, though. You know, whenever we come to a new normal, whatever that might look like, all of a sudden the concept of, my God, we spent all this money, how are we going to pay for all of this, is going to come up. And austerity is going to be the first thing that rears its ugly head, when probably everyone on this call right now recognizes that, no, this is the time to spend money to recover in a just way. You know, we've got I don't know what it is in Canada, but I know it's like 40 million in the States, and I always, like, Canada and the US represent each other as a tenth, so in so many ways, and I expect the Canadian unemployment rate is somewhere around 4 million. Now, we've got 4 million people out of work. We've got a ton of small stores that are going out of business, and they're not coming back. We got a ton of people that are going to need help coming out of this PTSD occurring thing that we're going through, you know? And austerity is not going to be the solution. And that is something that I think that we've got to understand, that we've got to push back and say, no, I'm sorry, we've had hallway medicine and look what that caused, you know? I'm sorry, we've had underspending chronically on the poor. And where does that leave us? We're going to have a mental health crisis happening out of this. And how are we going to treat that? We don't have the resources to treat that right now. We've got a long ways to go, and I think it's important that we keep the practical right in front of our faces and say, you know, they're not going to want to spend money on people. That's not what they do. And we've got to push them to spend money on people and recover from the bottom for a change, because trickle down just doesn't work. And that's about where I am. I you know, it's people like you, Stephanie, your age group, you guys rule the world. And I really love what's happening in the States on the level that you see those crowds out there, and they're peaceful, and yeah, who cares what the looters are? They're like a small percentage of, you know, cringeworthy people. But the people are out there protesting, and they're protesting for social justice. And, you know, you can take George Floyd and use that as the tipping point. But the fact of the matter is, everyone recognizes this has a lot more to do than racism and police brutality. It has to do with social justice. And we got the bull by the horns, and it's up to us to keep that going. And, you know, keep their noses to the grindstone and keep pressing them. And I mean, I write my MPP, I write my MP. I'm writing a letter to the city tonight. It's important that they know what's going on in people's minds. Thanks.
Thank you so much, John.
Rant.
No, thank you. That was really wonderful. You brought up a lot of really fantastic points that I think it's fair to say that Hamilton 350 agrees with, and I apologize if I'm speaking for the group. It was really wonderfully stated, and I could go on a long time about about that, but I'm not going to because Jim has his hand up and Mary has her hand up. And I know for absolute certainty they're going to do a better job than I would. So you go ahead, Jim, and we'll follow up with Mary.
Steph, you've been speaking for this group the whole time. It's okay.
Well,
That's your
and
job.
Bianca.
It's your job.
That's great.
So I agree completely with what John was just saying, and it really is a nice segue into what I wanted to talk about, and that is climate justice and the fact that both within and between countries, poverty seems to be an important element of this, and people that are very poor are going to suffer more harm from the climate change issues than people that are wealthy and can afford air conditioning and so on. But it's the one interesting thing to bear in mind is that it's not only about poverty, it's about inequity. I have a friend named Martin Daly who wrote a book recently about this issue. It was specifically focused on violence and inequity. And he reanalyzed work that people had done, sociologists had done over the years that had concluded that poverty is what leads to violence. And he did a more subtle analysis. And it turns out that a better explanation for violent countries, at least, if you go at that level, and even violent states or provinces, if you get at a finer level, turns out to be inequity. Now, inequity correlates with poverty, but when you control for poverty and look at these factors, inequity is a huge issue. So that brings up then the origin of police, which I understand that police were originated from France, and their job was really to protect the wealth of rich people from poor people. If you're really rich and you've got a lot of inequity, how are you going to hang on to your stuff? And one way is to have a security force that will protect you. So given that, given inequity, given race, because racism is all part of this, I think it's very interesting that in these times, and I'm going to bring COVID into this now, in these times of COVID, who are the people that are putting themselves most at risk for good reason? Those are people that are protesting. Those are Black people in large part, people that are protesting Black Lives Matter. And those people are putting themselves at risk. They're going out in large groups. They're going out and recognizing, I think it reminds me a little bit of one of Bob Dylan's songs where he says, when you got nothing, you've got nothing to lose. Those are the people that are at risk, and with regard to COVID, those are the people that are really suffering inequity. And I think this is a really important aspect of coming back from COVID. We really have to rethink all of this, and we have to justify the way our system works. And I think a large part of that is revisiting the capitalist system that we live under. And anyway. I could go on and on, but I'll stop now.
Thank you so much, Jim. Very good points, and you absolutely said it better than I would, so I'm very happy that you took that one on. I'm going to go over to Mary next, and I see Paul also has his hand up. I'm so glad you're able to make it out, Paul, and that we could hook you up with Bianca's help. So Mary, you take it on, and then we'll head over to Paul.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. I've got a little dog that wants to play right now, so I hope he doesn't bark. There's a rabbit out in the backyard he's quite interested in too. I just wanted to bring in, like, how will we pay for a just recovery? And just to point everyone to the movement that's international for public money. The wonderful former Greek Prime Minister, finance minister is very involved in this, and I was really encouraged. The Council of Canadians chapter here put forward a resolution on the Council of Canadians who is at the Green New Deal pact table to promote this idea of using the Bank of Canada to fund the just recovery. And so I asked a friend in Toronto who's very good on economics to help me with the resolution, and she did. And then a few days later, she sent me a paper that she was asked to write by Lead Now about this very thing. So it's really, really important, because the politicians, this ties into austerity, are going to be saying, well, you know, we can't really pay for what you want. You know, where's the money coming from? And that, you know, they'll have the excuse to put more austerity, as John was saying, which is, you know, just being so killing all these decades. So I really encourage you to just like Google, you know, International Movement for Public Money. I've got a lot of, you know, resources that I could share with people, and just, you know, it's just a really important piece of all this. And thank you, for Ruth, for mentioning it, that I should bring it up tonight.
Wonderful, Mary. Thank you very much. And if you can just type into the chat box there what you suggested us to Google, that would be wonderful. I know Paul had his hand up, so we'll go to him next. And I'm not sure if you had your hand up there, Ruth, but we'll definitely check in with Paul next.
So, yeah, thanks, Jim, for those comments on inequities. I'd like to return to your earliest comments on mental health and so on. When a rich person has a heart attack, he gets an ambulance and half the nearest fire station too. But when a 29-year-old girl in subsidized housing barricades herself on the balcony, all she gets is a couple cops to show up banging on the glass, trying to persuade her not to do what she's doing. That's just pathetic. John Tory tonight, I wish I could remember the numbers, said that there is almost no capability in Toronto for emergency response with mental health crisis. I think I heard him say there are 32,000 cases in Toronto a year that could be a mental health crisis, and they can't respond to even less than a tenth of them with an adequate team. So I just thought I'd follow up with you, Jim, there. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Paul, for following that up. That was lovely. We very much appreciate those opinions, statistics, really, more than opinions.
There are people that could respond to those situations if there was less money in the police coffers and more money going to social workers.
Yes. In fact, John Tory made that point. This has to be held directly from health ministries and not by the cops.
Miriam?
This circles back to the damage that racism and inequity and poverty are causing to people. Like, a lot of these mental health crises are things that could be preventable to begin with if people's lives were decent, if they had a chance at a decent life and getting help much earlier.
Absolutely. And I see you have your hand up, Susan, but I just want to make sure, Ruth, I thought you had your hand up, so I'm not sure if you wanted to say something. Bianca as well, and then we'll go to Susan. Do you have anything you wanted to say there, Ruth, or was I misreading that? No? Okay. Not Ruth. Bianca?
I'm going to skip over until everyone has had, I'm not making a comment on the current subject, so come back to me.
Thank you very much for making recognition and letting us keep on this topic while we still have some hands up here. So Susan, you go ahead. I'm just going to unmute you here.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Let me just go away from Don. I just wanted to respond to hang on, I'm just moving away from the other computer. To the issue about police and not being trained in mental health stuff. I have a friend, a dear friend, who's in Kitchener-Waterloo area, and he is a social worker, and he is part of a program now that rides with cops to respond to mental health calls, and it's turning out fantastic. It's really, really difficult, really hard work. What it's also done is given him an appreciation for what cops have to go through. So there's the other side of that. but it's been wildly successful. The cops love them because they have training that the cops don't have. So there is a model out there, and I don't know, I guess I could probably find out about it and get that to Don, and he can make sure it gets to you guys. Okay, that's it.
Okay, wonderful. Now, thank you very much, Susan, for that information. That's very helpful, and I think we can all agree that would absolutely be the case, because police should have training for mental health situations, but it is a lot for one person to handle. So thank you very much for sharing that, and I hope they continue to do that and include that program. I did just lower John's hand. I was pretty sure it was still up from your original statement, but I just wanted to make sure you didn't have anything else to add before we move on to Bianca, because she's moving on to something new.
No, I'm fine.
You're fine, and John, are you okay?
I'm good.
Lovely. All right, Bianca, take us out to something new.
It's not something new. I just have to go. And I wanted to say goodbye. I didn't want to just ghost out. I have a little boy that needs to get to bed. So I just wanted to thank everyone for coming, and thank you for the 350 peeps for holding this space, and just congratulate all the speakers for doing such a passionate job in conveying what we had to say tonight. And thank you and goodbye. And I hope to see all of you in person very soon, hopefully.
Thank you so much, Bianca.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bianca. Thanks for not disappearing, and thank you for all the work that you put into this. After coming in so late, you organized this pristinely, and I'm super thankful for that. So thank you for that, and for the speaking you did tonight. Yeah, just pat on the back for sure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Everyone have a good night, and thank you for all the other people for sticking around. But I'm going to go sing lullabies.
All right.
Does anyone want a donut?
I'm going to leave too. Goodbye, everybody. It's been great
Yeah,
time.
you know what, that's what I was going to say. Nobody feel that they absolutely have to stay till the end of this, because we're not sure how long it's going to go on. So there's absolutely no requirement to stay if you need to go. And thank you so much for staying on this long. We really appreciate it. These have been some great topics of conversation. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? I see your hand.
I'm going to go as well, so I'll say goodbye to everyone.
Jim? Okay, thanks so much.
Bye,
Great
Dawn.
night, Jim.
Great
Dawn's
job,
trying to
guys.
feel
You
bad.
did a really wonderful job. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. I was sweating, but that's okay.
Good night.
Okay, bye.
Okay, does anybody else have anything they'd like to say? Miriam, is that a hand up or you're just waving goodbye?
No, it's a hand up. It's a hand
Go
up.
ahead.
Oh, there's more. I think Donald has a hand up as well. But I want to say this is a really rich conversation, right? And there's a lot of many different issues that are all interwoven and connected, and possibly some of us think we know what the root cause is in our economic system, possibly, but that is source of power and inequity and all kinds of problems. But I guess, and it's great, and I don't want to stop the conversation, but like I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, how do we move things forward from here? I mean, it's great if we all this thinking needs to be done, and this visioning of how the world can be, and what the problem is, but how do we all unite all these different issues to move forward, to really get that decisive mass of people we need to make change?
And you know what? I don't know that anyone has an answer specifically for that right now, and that's why I'm really excited that we are going to hold another one of these meetings in a week or two. We haven't chosen a specific date yet, everyone, so bear with us, but just to have a strategy session and determine how we can do that, not only in Hamilton, but for the province and nationally with people in Hamilton. I know that might be overwhelming, so if you only want to focus on what's going on in Hamilton, that's totally understandable as well. And if you're willing to join us for that, that'd be great. Now, I think you said, Miriam, that Don had his hand up, Donald, so I apologize if I'm talking over you, Donald. Do you want to say anything? Or am I misunderstanding?
Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Maybe it was other Don.
I thought it might be, but then he disappeared.
And he had his hand up to say bye.
Okay.
But maybe,
Sorry
I'm
to
not
put you on
sure.
the spot there, Daniel. I didn't want to do that, but unfortunately your mic's off.
Or is he there?
Looks like you might be coming in.
Oh, maybe he's waving.
Hi.
He's waving.
Can you unmute him? Okay.
I tried to, but it didn't work, so I'm not sure what's happening here. It's like it doesn't want to unmute. I have a feeling he's also trying to unmute, and we're going over each other.
But yeah, Miriam, I do agree. It's so overwhelming. What was it, Mary? Mary's trying to talk too.
I'm just doing lips.
Oh,
unmute, Dawn.
Oh, there, Dawn.
Dawn's unmuted. If you want to say something.
Well, I'm fine. Thank you. Enjoyed the whole thing. Right.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sticking around this long. We really appreciate it. Okay.